So welcome today to this month's Kelsey Museum virtual flash talk. The title of today's talk is Inspiring Conservation, the Great Lakes Gardens at Matthaei Botanical Gardens. I am Stephanie Haley, community and youth educator here at the Kelsey Museum. Today's presentation will last about 15 minutes, followed by 15 minutes of Q&A with you, our audience. Joining me today is our speaker, Michael Kost, who serves as the associate curator at the University of Michigan Matthaei's Botanical Garden and Nichols Arboretum, and as a lecturer in the School for Environment and Sustainability. He joins us today to talk about Matthaei Botanical Gardens, Great Lakes Gardens, because they are celebrating their 10-year anniversary of the gardens. Welcome, Michael. I will turn it over to you to give your presentation. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us today.
Well, thank you. Glad to be here, and let me share my screen. Oh, that's not the slide I wanted to start with, but you will see that slide at the end. Okay, great. So let me just get my screen organized here. All right, so I'll be talking about our Great Lakes Garden and specifically how it inspires conservation action and education. So this garden was established back in 2013. It's 10 years old now, and it's a series of native plant gardens. So it's not just one garden, it's a series of native plant gardens that are specifically designed to showcase a variety of natural communities from the Great Lakes region. And you can see a rough planting design there and some of the natural communities that we showcase or this plant species in it. It's the information in curating this garden, the information really comes from my past work before I arrived at UM. For about 15 years, I was an ecologist with Michigan Natural Features Inventory as part of the Nature Conservancy and Michigan State University. And in that time, we documented and described and classified and tracked the full range of natural communities in the state of Michigan, and then produced a wide variety of educational resources, from a 300-page technical document that the text appears on a series of web pages with photos and other links, 5 books, and 55 natural community abstracts that range from 5 to 20 some odd pages on each one of these natural communities. But key to this garden is that I draw on that information in my curation duties to select the plant species for each garden, their arrangement, their patterning, their abundance. This all comes from that information really comes from my past work at MSU. So the garden, as I said, opened in 2013. Here's its opening day photo, no plants or very little. We get roughly about 125,000 plus visitors through the space every year. So it's a great opportunity for education. Sorry, just technical difficulty there. So the Great Lakes Garden plays an important role in education as well as ex situ plant conservation. And ex situ, that means out of place. It means conservation efforts that aren't protecting the land where the species grow exactly in its native habitat, but taking those species out into a garden setting where they can then be used in ecological restoration efforts in the future, should those be needed. So we have about 300 species, 22 of which are rare plant species in the Great Lakes Garden. We offer public tours, and those are led by staff, students, and volunteers. It's used by a variety of courses, both here at UM, up to a graduate school course. I teach in SEAS, that School for Environment and Sustainability, and my students, we go to the Great Lakes Garden all the time to learn plants and ecosystems. It's used by elementary school, high school, and college classes from nearby universities as well. We have interpretive signs, here's one of them, and plant labels. And the learning doesn't just, it's not all active learning from the standpoint of like a teacher and a student. It's also maintaining the garden. So our staff, students, and volunteers love working in this garden because they learn. Our volunteers tell me that all the time. That's why they show up. Same with the students. They come away with a lot more knowledge than they started with by planting these native plants. I've been told the best way to learn a native plant or any plant is to plant it at your home and grow it. And you can see it in all phases of its life cycle. And people are able to do that in the garden through volunteering or through their jobs. So here's a list of the 22, currently 22 rare species. We're always adding new species. Not everything we plant makes it. But there's a list in it, their state and federal status. And one of the recent species we just established this year in partnership with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Biological Station, UN Biological Station, as well as local nonprofits, is this plant, Michigan monkey flower, which is endemic to the Great Lakes region, meaning endemic, meaning it only grows in the Great Lakes region. It only grows in a few spots in northern Michigan. That's its entire global range. And we now are experimentally learning to grow this plant so that it can, in case it goes, sites blink out, sites where we've collected it from no longer exists, we're able to have that gene pool, that gene stock, and can replant it. So each one of these plant species supports a whole range of invertebrates, from butterflies and beetles and moths and bugs and to spiders, which I don't have listed here. But we've documented, well, actually, one of my former interns, Beth Wheeler, who was a C student at the time, she documented over at least 100 species of invertebrates, 27 Lepidoptera, that's the moths and butterflies, 27, variety of beetles and bees and flies. And that's pretty much unheard of in terms of like number of butterflies. You can't go to any particular spot and see that many butterflies, typically, not anymore anyway. It's you're lucky if you see 3 or 4 in any given spot. And we've got 27 floating through the Great Lakes Garden, which is quite an amazing thing. And we have that because of the concentration of the diversity of plants. And those diversity of plants represent a diversity of ecosystems, so or a diversity of natural communities. And thus we end up with, we didn't set out to create an amazing pollinator garden or garden for, just invertebrates. That wasn't its goal, but it was an ancillary benefit. When you plant this diversity of species, you can support a great diversity of invertebrates. So I'm going to go through a few of the gardens and some pictures and talk a little bit about some of the gardens. So one of them is an Alvar garden, and you can see that here with the limestone bedrock and limestone gravel, and it's designed to conform to the slope of the land. So this garden here is our Alvar garden. That's a natural community that occurs near the shorelines of the Great Lakes, Lake Huron and Lake Huron, a little bit in Lake Erie, as well as northern Lake Michigan, on the east side of the UP, the eastern side, where limestone is close to the surface. Limestone is high in calcium carbonate, so we end up with those species that occur in that ecosystem are calcium loving or calciphiles. So we have these raised beds full of limestone gravel that support these calciphiles, these calcium loving plants, a great diversity of them. A couple of the rare species that we've planted are lakeside daisy and dwarf lake iris. Both of these are also endemic to the Great Lakes region. That's the only place in the world where they occur. And we have them represented in this garden. So it's a great place to see plants that normally you'd have to travel very far, and you'd be lucky to find them unless you already know where they are. So it's a wonderful place for people to see plants that they wouldn't get a chance to see otherwise. We have a dunes garden or open dunes garden. We have pictured here, you can see marram grass. That's the dominant grass in the dunes, along with sandreed grass, the other dominant plant that occurs in our Great Lakes dunes. And hoary puccoon is the yellow flower. Here's another view of that garden with sand coreopsis in bloom. That's the yellow flower. Creeping juniper is a low-growing shrub that's common in the dunes, and red windflower is also common. One of the rare plants that we have growing in this garden is pitcher's thistle, which is a federally and state threatened and also a Great Lakes endemic. The only place in the world that occurs are in open dunes along the shorelines of Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, Lake Superior. And that's it for its range. Cobble Beach is another natural community that we showcase here and the plants associated with it. You can see the gravel. Much of the shoreline of the Great Lakes that isn't sand, as many of you know, is cobble, is rock. And we've got an assortment of plants associated with that ecosystem. One of them is northern ragwort, the yellow flower that's in bloom, as well as Lake Huron tansy, a state threatened species, silverweed, potentilla anserina, very common low-growing plant along the Great Lakes shoreline, especially where limestone's close to the surface or where there's limestone cobble, and similarly limestone calamint, also, and that's a mint species. We have a prairie garden. This is before it flowers, as you can see, so you can see the sign and it's layout a little bit, but as the season progresses, it's filled with color, yellows and purples and pinks, and white, so it's quite striking. We have at least 60 prairie species, including 6 rare plant species, and we represent a broad range of the diversity of natural communities, of a diversity of prairie natural communities. So in Michigan and other states, prairie will range from dry sand prairie to dry mesic prairie, which is a rich loamy prairie, to wet mesic and wet prairie. So we've selected a subset of species from each of those prairie types and planted them in zones within this prairie. So we get a full range of diversity of ecosystems represented, or natural communities represented by the groups of plants. I mentioned Lepidoptera, the butterflies and moths. We have a variety of them in the garden, documented at least 27. And one of those is monarch, which is a federal candidate for listing. It's expected to be listed by the Fish and Wildlife Service this year as endangered. And its population has been steadily declining for many years. Even on its, both here in the United States and in its overwintering grounds in Mexico. The caterpillars, as most of you know, if not all, they feed exclusively on milkweed. And we have 6 species of milkweeds in the garden, most of which occur in the prairie or adjacent savanna garden or oak openings garden. And they are listed here. Purple milkweed is state threatened in Michigan. We have an oak openings garden, which is a type of savanna dominated by oak with an understory of prairie and woodland species. So under the, in the sunny areas, the prairie species, and under the shade of the oaks, woodland species. And we have 4 species of oaks planted in the oak openings. We have a wet woodland garden that occupies a floodplain along the Fleming Creek, which flows through the botanical gardens. And a boardwalk, a raised boardwalk, traverses this garden, so it's elevated above the zone of flooding, which is really awesome because during those floods, when Fleming Creek overspills its banks, you can walk through the boardwalk above the water, and it's a great experience. It's really quite cool. This wet woodland garden is dominated by silver maple, which is a common floodplain species, so a large tree. And we have a diverse herbaceous layer or ground layer. One of the species that's fun to see is cardinal flower, which is in bloom right now. We have a dry mesic forest garden or oak hickory forest garden, and that supports many forest species, including common trillium, Dutchman's breeches, bloodroot, twin leaf, wild geranium, and sharp-lobed hepatica, which is one of the first species to bloom in the spring. We also have an orchid garden, which was established in 2017. We've built and installed raised planter boxes, which allow it to be elevated above the zone of flooding, and also allows us to customize the soil mix for the different orchid species. On one side of that boardwalk, we have species associated with fens and wet prairies that are high in alkalinity. And on the side facing us, the boxes are filled with a soil mix that supports bog species, which are acidic. Some of the orchids we've been able to establish and grow are large yellow lady slipper, white lady slipper, which is state threatened, grass pink, and orange fringed orchid, a state endangered species. As I mentioned, it's our 10-year anniversary, and we're celebrating with a variety of an assortment of events. We have a native plant symposium scheduled for Friday, August 18th in 2 weeks. And we have 8 speakers, including 2 nationally known speakers, Doug Tallamy and Heather Holm. And then that'll be followed by an evening reception. So we're really looking forward to that. We have a native plant sale on Saturday and Sunday, August 19th and 20th, and where you can come and purchase native plants. We have upcoming art exhibit, a family event in October, and a fall prescribed burn demo day in November. So I hope you'll consider coming out to some of those events. I want to thank our project team, student interns, volunteers, plant suppliers, photographers, and those who provided data for this talk. And I want to thank you for attending. So happy to answer any questions or engage in a discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was incredibly interesting. I just want to open it up to our audience for any questions that you have. You can go ahead and just feel free to ask your question or throw your question in the chat, and myself or Michael we can answer that.
I just wanted to thank you for this presentation. It's just wonderful, and it's going to be a treasure to be able to watch it before making a trip to Matthaei and then watch it again after coming home. So I really, really want to thank you. I'm a pedestrian now, and I'm finding it very difficult to get to the garden because I've been told that the Ann Arbor bus system does not go there, which means that the handicap bus system no longer goes there. Does the U of M bus still make a stop that you know of at the garden?
No, I'm so sorry. It's a perennial issue for us. We really struggle with getting people there, especially our students, who most of which do not have cars like yourself. So Uber and Lyft certainly come there regularly, but we don't have a public transportation at this point, and we've not been successful in lobbying for that yet. So
well,
I'm sorry.
One advantage of using Uber is because it costs a certain amount. I stayed for 5 hours because I wanted to get the most for my money. So
yeah,
there's a bright side to everything.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, I'm sorry that I can't give you a better, a more uplifting response. So,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi,
Hi.
thank you so much. I really enjoyed your presentation. It was great. I don't know hardly anything about the gardens, and I appreciate you, just being so explaining it so well. I was wondering, is there any have you ever come to the rescue of a plant that was practically extinct, but because of your garden, you were able to save it and replant?
So we know, because there aren't a lot of, so there is no plant species at present that's like blinking out in Michigan. So
Okay.
if we're focused, locally. So there hasn't been a need for last minute rescue yet. But there are more common species where the woodlot gets destroyed. And we have done a bit of plant rescue where there is a construction project mobilizing, and we've gotten permission to go in and collect the plants. We did that in a forest a couple of years ago. And so that we will do. And so whenever we can, we rescue plants, and we'll plant them both in this garden, which we did, as well as some of the other spaces. We manage Nichols Arboretum right on campus along the
Oh, wow.
We planted plants there, and at Botanical Gardens. We have 250 acres at the Botanical Gardens.
Wow.
So the Great Lakes Garden is part of our display garden, which is a 5-acre area that's fenced from deer. It's another reason why we can grow the diversity of plants there, is because we have a fence that keeps deer out. Otherwise, we couldn't do what we do there.
Mm-hmm.
And we do plant, we have a number of spaces where when we have the opportunity, we will rescue plants and plant them. So
Thank you.
Sure.
So I know you mentioned your plant sale. Is there anything that we can do sort of within our own home gardens to kind of promote native plants, and that you would recommend to promote these plants thriving in our own gardens?
Absolutely. I do that in my house, and I did that in my last place and the place before that. And yeah, it really helps transform your yard and your activities into just a lot of fun. So these plants are widely available. Many of them are widely available to plant through local plant sales. So we have our plant sale in the fall. There's a native plant expo in the spring hosted by the Washtenaw Conservation District, Washtenaw County Conservation District. And there's farmers markets where they offer rare, native plants. But when you start planting them in your yard, for those that haven't, or maybe all of you have, you start paying attention to who's visiting them, the pollinators, and they just give you a tremendous amount of joy, both to see the plant thrive. The first year it will stay small, next year it'll be more robust. Within 3 years, it's usually pretty good size and filling some space. And then if you've planted, 3 to 5 of the same species, enough for it to get cross-pollination and produce viable seed, you'll start getting, they'll become weeds in your lawn. And that's pretty fun to see them. And sometimes you can choose like, oh, that's a great spot for that plant. We'll just leave it there. But they'll start colonizing, or what's referred to as rewilding. And it's really fun to see that. And when we moved into the house we're in right now, there weren't any native plants. And consequently, there were very few bees and butterflies. And now, wherever if we sit near those native plants and, have our coffee or have breakfast, they're just abuzz with a different species. And it's really fun to see. They're not biting, it's the mosquitoes that are biting us, but the other, these aren't biting insects. They're just gathering pollen and nectar and going about their business, their busy business. And it really makes you feel good, like you can make a difference. The other thing that's really important that, so I'm a conservation biologist. I've studied ecology and conservation biology my whole career. And one of the things we talk a lot about are corridors, connecting isolated blocks of habitat so that species can migrate or move between them, right? We don't want just isolated blocks of habitat with an urban island in between, because it disrupts gene flow, and species will eventually become inbred, plants and animals, if they can't move amongst the forest fragments or between natural habitats. It's okay if you can fly, but many species, or you're big enough to walk and hide, but many species can't. And that includes many of our insects and the plants too. So by establishing native plants in your yard, you're helping create those bridges between habitats, between natural habitats, between isolated blocks of forest or prairie or old fields. You're creating like stepping stones. And a lot of insects just need a stepping stone between forest fragments or between habitat fragments. So that's really important. And when you do that, you're going to want to, work toward having a good amount of fall flowering plants like the goldenrods and the asters, because they will help provision the queen bumblebee, for example, to overwinter. They'll gather pollen toward in the fall, like in September, late August and September and early October. And then you're going to also want to provide some spring flowering plants and summer flowering plants. You're going to want to have a progression of blooming flowering plants, native plants throughout the growing season. And it's something you can work toward. It's some species are super easy and they spread on their own. The goldenrods and asters are often that way. And some species, really need to seek out and plant. But if you have a shady spot, a lot of the plants that you'll plant are going to bloom in the spring. And if you have an open sunny spot, a lot of those will be summer and fall blooming plants. And if you are able to, over time, over a number of years, pull that off and maintain that, that'll really help the pollinators. And you'll be providing these stepping stones, these corridors, these wildlife corridors that allow insects and other species. Birds have also been shown to nest successfully where yards have, well, the figure is 70% native plants. So yards that have lots of native plants end up producing lots of young in the nests, and yards without those nests often don't survive, because a songbird like a chickadee requires 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars to raise its young, to raise a clutch of 3 to 5 eggs. 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars. They'll gather hundreds a day, and with the female doing most of the work, but the males also pitching in on most species too. And those nestlings and fledge and are successful if they're fed enough food, but only the native plants can produce enough Lepidoptera, enough butterflies and moths for those. Really, the non-native plants don't support, like ginkgo, which is a beautiful tree, but it doesn't support any caterpillars and moths. And the oak trees support over 450 species of caterpillars and moths, of moths and butterflies. So consequently, your oak tree is really supporting the birds to be able to set up a nest and raise young successfully. Otherwise, a lot of times the birds just aren't, their young aren't fledging, or they're not fledging enough to replace their numbers. So the native plants are critical, because those are the insects here have evolved with those native plants. So they really play an important role in ecology and species conservation, not just for the plants, but for the insects, and then consequently the birds and other things that are eating those.
Oh, thank you. That's so important.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating. Do you have maybe on your website, or maybe through Washtenaws website, like a guide of what would be the most beneficial plants to plant in the spring or the fall? That just kind of occurred to me while you were speaking. You know, what can I, what do I have in my yard already, and what could I add to it maybe?
We actually don't, and that's a great idea to put together. And I don't know, I would think the conservation district, Washington County District, might have something on that. And the growers, the selection of plants that they offer are the plants. So in here in Ann Arbor, there are several native plant growers, and you can find them at the farmers market, or online. If you just native plants Ann Arbor, you'll find that. And the plants that they grow are the native plants, and they will offer, and you can choose, a variety of colors. They'll have a variety of, like on Wild Type's website, they have a guide that shows you the moisture requirements, the light requirements, and the color, so you can pick from that. And really, you can't go wrong if you're planting the native plants. So it's a matter of every yard is a little bit different, right? Most of us have a little bit of shade because we have houses that shade part of the yard, and most houses have a little bit of sun, the areas that are sunny, and so you can pick out a variety of plants for those gardens. Michigan Natural Features Inventory, who I mentioned earlier, their website has we have on there with each of the natural communities, the plants that are associated with those. So if you're going for a prairie or a forest, a particular natural community, we have an assortment. We have a list of plants, and those plants, many of those plants are available to purchase through the local plant growers. You can also collect seed. You can walk through, for any given yard, you don't need a lot of seed. It's really easy to grow these plants, and you can collect a handful of seeds and bring that home and put it in a potting soil and water it, or put it in potting soil in the winter and let the pot sit out, and the rain will water it in the spring, all winter and spring, and it will grow plants. So you will end up with lots of seedlings that way too. So they're really easy to start with a little bit of effort. Yeah.
Wow, thank you so much.
Yeah, Wild Type is the name, is one word, and Wild Type Nursery, or Native Plant Nursery, and they're in Mason, so they're a little ways away from Ann Arbor, but they've got great list of plants, but they also show you the timing, when it flowers, the color, the height, the moisture requirements, the light requirements, all that kind of stuff. So that makes it really easy to plan. And they also have a list of the species that are, all these plants are host species for something. They're all important, but they actually list some of the butterflies that are where this plant is supporting those species. Many insects are host specific. They have a specific genus or family of plants that they can have evolved to eat, and they're really only eat those. Not all, but a good number are. And same thing with bees. Bees will, like their whole face, their whole body is structured to eat a particular, to gather pollen and nectar from particular species. So they list at least some of the caterpillars, some of the butterflies that are host specific for some of the plants.
Thank you so much. Does anyone have additional questions? Well, if not, I guess we will conclude our talk today. I just want to thank Michael. This was an incredibly interesting presentation today. Thank you so much for joining us at the Kelsey Museum. And as always, our flash talks are on the first Friday of each month. So thank you all so much.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk with you today.